Let's have a conversation. What's up, y'all? So I have a video that I'm going to be playing for you guys. I'm going to give you some background information about the video and who's in it, what it is. I have a speaking series that I have been doing, I think about 2 years now, that I've called Champion Within Conversations. Some of those conversations are still on my page, and I think part of this conversation is on my page, but I just think it's great content. And this is going to be what equates to a watch party of this conversation that I had with my friends, Dylan and Cassandra. They are a married couple that I met virtually. I didn't meet them in person, but they had a podcast at a particular point in time a couple of years ago. I was trying to get on podcasting, doing podcasts and being involved in podcasts. So I had reached out to them and we did about 3 episodes or so on their podcast, and we just kind of clicked from there. And then I had them do this video interview with me in September of 2021. I was in LA at the time for a fitness competition that I was doing, and I did the interview right there in my hotel room. So without further ado, I'm going to be playing that for y'all right now. Which was called Mental Health Talks at the time. Hi everyone, welcome to our next Champion Within Conversations. I have 2 of my friends here that we met, I think, a couple of years ago, Dylan and Cassandra. I met Cassandra first on Instagram through my page, which was called Mental Health Talks at the time. It's now called Music and Mental Health. And I had reached out to her about a podcast that they were doing at the time, because I was really trying to get onto a podcast and do an interview to talk about my different issues with mental health and things that I've overcome. And at the time, it didn't happen, but we kind of communicated, and eventually I got on the show, and I think we had about 3 different discussions that went very well. And without further ado, here they are.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.
I always think back to that moment of reaching out, because with Instagram, it gets kind of wonky and scary, right? Somebody's reaching out to you and saying like, hey, do you want to buy this? Or do you want to be an ambassador for this? Or, hey, I want to reach out to you for this. But your tone was different. Like there was something about, you asking about the podcast. It was very sincere and just something that you wanted to. And it wasn't until later that we were talking that you were like, I was even nervous about asking, but I took the leap of faith and I tried, and I was so grateful that you did. But at the time, I think we were in transition, right? Because we were moving from the apartment to my grandmother's house.
Yes, I believe so.
But then I'm like, we need people to talk. And there was this guy that reached out and he wants to talk about mental health. Let's do it. Because mental health, was and still is very important to us.
Absolutely.
And you're right. It's just something about the chemistry between us. Just, we were able to do 3, and they were all so comfortable. They were honest and open, and they were just fantastic conversations. So we're happy to be here to support you and with what you're doing, because you supported us. So thanks for having us.
Thank you. I mean, that's synergy, because these types of things that we were talking about in those discussions at that time were not things that I was commonly talking about. And I work in the mental health field. I've done so for the last 6 years. And even sometimes at work, I'm not discussing those types of things. We went through like childhood things that happened that I only talked about in therapy. And we went through like the Black Lives Matter movement and a rally that I had just gone to, a lot of different things. So yeah, I appreciated that friendship that we formed.
You're very excited to have a friend on the East Coast and to connect some like beyond our bubble.
Yeah.
And it's a scary thing, right? Especially when it comes to mental health because it is so personal. And while mental health and discussions around it are starting to open up within not just specific communities, but multiple communities, it's still hard for people to come and talk about it. There's still that stigma around, like, I shouldn't be talking about this because people potentially will think less of me. And that was a big reason why we wanted to get on and start the podcast, is to destigmatize it. We're not anybody special. It was just something like getting on and just having that conversation and sharing that journey so we could support others, and maybe others could hear our stories and say, okay, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to have these feelings I'm having, but there's also light at the end of the tunnel. And there's always going to be that support. And I'm very lucky because, when it comes to Dylan and I was the one that had the severe depression. I had suicidal ideation, and he, as my support, was going through it on a different, viewpoint of it. So just kind of giving that perspective, I think, is very helpful. And there's not enough.
You're going to hear them talk about this more within this discussion. But what's interesting about Dylan and Cassandra is that Cassandra has her own, excuse me, I have allergies. She has her own mental health challenges like I do. And she speaks about the dynamic of her husband learning about what was going on with her while she was learning what was going on with herself, and figuring out between the two of them what the best thing is in terms of support. Because a lot of times you'll have one person in the family that has the diagnosis and the other people in the family trying to understand them. So I think this is great in terms of the explanations that they gave.
Out there, and you're an ally because of that now, and you're a friend because of it. And even when we weren't communicating or recording a podcast, you and I were checking in with each other via Instagram. And that's huge because the bigger support system you have, the lot easier, the more it's easier to find your way out of that dark tunnel, right? So it was nice to have another ally.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned Instagram, because there's a lot of mental health pages out there, but there's not a lot of them that you communicate with and get a person. It's like they have made them really systematic to where they'll post a bunch of quotes and they'll repost a bunch of mental health related things, but you don't have a person there saying like, I have mental health issues. This is what I'm experiencing. I follow a lot of these pages and they do give me plenty of good information that I connect with and repost, but I'm not connecting with a person. So in a way, it does help to have those things going out there, but in another way, it doesn't help to normalize talking about mental health issues, just like you were talking about with stigma. I think it's a very powerful thing to have somebody like you or myself saying, I deal with this and I'm still here, I'm still living. There's nothing crazy. And there's some irony that I find YouTube to be that way as well. There's a lot of pages that I can just type something in the YouTube search bar and find a lot of mental health information, but there's not a ton of pages that I find where a person is like, I have a mental health diagnosis, I have a mental illness, and I'm still able to live and I'm still able to enjoy my life and be happy. I think that is powerful. About me, and I'm just a person who's going through the world, and I deal with my issues, and I'm still keeping it moving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something that you don't even realize that you could potentially even have. Too.
Yeah.
I had a cousin reach out to me, asking me about panic attacks because she had just recently experienced one. And she's like, I had no idea what you were going through. Like she had an idea because I talked openly about it with my family, and she followed me on Instagram too. So I was open about it on Instagram. But she's like, I never completely understood until now. And I told her it's probably something that's always been with you, but you just got so used to masking it that this is just a wave that's coming in. I'll just have to work through it, self-care, put on that mask, keep going.
Yeah.
But at one point, you're just putting a cap on a bottle and still you're shaking it, and it's going to build and get and build, and you're going to explode. And unfortunately, she just got to that point for her where it came in the form of a panic attack. So, yes, like seeing those things on Instagram can be nice. And it's like, okay, there's people out there who are trying to do good. And while, I didn't reach out and talk to every single person, or vice versa, not everybody reached out to me and said, hey, can we talk about this? Or can I have that connection like you and I started talking? It's a different feeling when there is somebody you're actually talking to and you're able to connect with. So I really made sure to say, if you need anything, you call me, you text me, you let me know, because this is new. And inspirational quotes are great, and workbooks that you can buy off a shelf are great. But talking to somebody and connecting with somebody and having a support and ally is a huge difference. Makes a huge difference too, right? Like if I didn't have Dylan, I don't know where I'd be right now. And I tell people quite honestly and often that had I not had Dylan, who had been so understanding and patient, and concerned, I don't think I'd be alive today, because I would not have had that support. I would have had family potentially saying, "Oh, you'll get over it. It's just a phase. You know, it, just keep going. Keep doing things that keep you busy," type of things. Just kind of what we always hear. Um, and then, like I said, like I met you, and the support just kind of kept growing. But it is kind of reaching out and taking that leap and saying, "Hey, can I talk to you about this?" With somebody you trust, and have them listen.
So I know we talked about this before, not here, but we talked about this before. What was it like for you two, for you, Cassandra, and you, Dylan, when you started having these symptoms? And how was it like when you were having these conversations? Was it smooth? Was there difficulties? You shook your head.
No, it wasn't smooth at any point. It was terrifying, pretty much throughout. And we were really feeling our way through every single step of the way. Like we barely knew what was going on. We kind of were able to give these things names like depression and anxiety and things like that, but we didn't really know what to do or how to get through it, or what all this stuff meant. But the thing that I think saved us from the beginning was the communication. Like there were times that she was, and it was hard for her to tell me how she was feeling, because a lot of times she wasn't feeling much of anything, or she didn't know or understand how she was feeling. And to try to put that into words was very challenging and very stressful. But she would try all the time. And then I remember very vividly the day that you basically just said, like, I want to hurt myself, and that kind of honesty, that kind of openness, I think ultimately is what saved us, because the fact that she was able to verbalize those feelings, had she not, she probably would have just held on to it and kept thinking and thinking and thinking and maybe done something terrible.
I don't remember the exact moment in which we identified that it was depression. I do remember thinking, oh, this is what I felt with Isis, because I had postpartum depression after our youngest daughter was born. And so I was connecting the dots, but it wasn't like the little sparks weren't touching and connecting completely. But it seemed to be getting worse, and I was calling out from work because I just didn't have the energy. I was just sad and just numb all the time. And my work situation at the time was incredibly stressful. This was also a time when my mother was going to go through a kidney transplant. She had already had her liver transplant. She was going to get her kidney transplant. And then on top of that, I had offered to be an altruistic donor for kidney. So even though I wasn't going in with her because my sister was going in, I chose to continue on in the process. So that was an added stress. Not that I was regretting it or worried about it. It's just there's a lot to go into preparing for a major surgery like that. And then work is just constantly banging down on me. And there's a lot of pressures coming from the company, my leadership, my teammates, my cast members at the time. And it just all kept building. And I just felt this more of, I just don't want to do this anymore. It was helplessness. It was sad, deep sadness. It was anger. It was numbness. And I think the point when it started to get numb is when I was like, I'm just done. Like, I can't feel. So what's the point? If I can't enjoy, if I can't feel happiness, if I can't be with my family 100%, then I'm useless. So why be here? So, and that's where those suicidal ideations came in. And Dylan is absolutely 100% right. Like, the communication, I think, is what helped us. And that's why we, especially when we have friends or family or just anybody who we talk about mental health with, we talk about communication. It's not opening up right away because we understand that can be incredibly scary. Like, I was in a unique position where my husband was very understanding. Not everybody has that. Not everybody has a partner that will listen and understand or try to understand, because he didn't understand 100%. He's not going through this. He just sees pain. He sees nothing coming out of me at one point, right?
Yeah, she wouldn't get out of bed.
And then there
She
was the
wouldn't talk to
guilt
me.
because I could see the person I love being hurt by not being able to help. Because how could he? I didn't even know how I needed him help.
Yeah.
So it just, us talking. And, you know, I was going to therapy. I went to see a therapist, and that was going well for a while. And then on our last session, I literally came in as if it was my first day. And she was just like, you need to do more intensive work. And it blew her mind because I was taking steps in the right direction. And then all of a sudden it was a complete 180. So I did group therapy. I did individual therapy. I was on medication, which I was open to. Like, I was willing to try anything to help me get into a good place. Medication ended up not working out for me anyway. I'm not on it now. It was really hard getting off of it. But, you know, it's one of those things, like with medication, you have to be patient with. And not having insurance for a part didn't give me that choice to be patient with it. So I had to learn to find other coping mechanisms, which was a lot of talking and communicating with him. And working through those. So it's a long answer, but I mean, it's not an easy answer to give because there is so much that goes into it.
And just to add a tiny bit more, just from my perspective, like I was in the position where I was still going to work. She at one point actually even resigned from Disney. But every time that I would leave the house, it was a trigger for her, and she would go into depression when I was leaving. And so it put me in this position where I had to go to work because we had to make money, we had to support ourselves, but me going to work was causing the problem to get worse. So it was this no-win situation of every day making this decision to either, you know, call out and stay home and sort of take care of her, or go to work and try to take care of all of us and make sure we have, you know, a place to live and food and all that stuff. I mean, I literally, there were days that I did not know what I was going to come home to. And it's just a scary feeling.
Wow, that's deep. This is the second time I'm hearing this, but it's just as deep the second time as it was the first time. And you said, you know, we're nothing special. I think that that's a really special story that you have to have gone through something like that. Yeah.
What always gets me is like, I think the fact that we aren't anything special is why we kind of need to talk about this, because people need to know that just ordinary people deal with this. There was a person that I was talking to where I work currently, and she was telling me that she's going through the exact same thing with it's her father instead that's going through depressive episodes. And she's in that same position where he was usually the breadwinner, but now she's the one living at home who's paying all the bills because he can't work all the time. And she's having that same exact decision that I had every day of, do I stay home and take care of him, or do I go to work and get money? And so I was able to sort of talk through what we had gone through and just kind of the situation that we had. And you know, same thing. She's not anything, she's not a celebrity. She's not anything special beyond, you know, an important person in her dad's life. But she's going to be there for him and make those decisions. But me being able to talk to her, let her know that she's not the only person that's gone through this. And I think that's the key.
I totally agree. And that's actually how I became a peer counselor. I said, who am I in the mental health field? I didn't do that in school. I don't really have this tremendous psych knowledge aside from, things that I got secondhand from my therapist, things that they told me that I just retained and Google and books and things like that. But it's not like I got a whole psych degree or master's or anything like that. So what do I know? But I realized over some time, it's not about what I know, it's about what I've been through.
Yeah.
And just like you said, somebody can give you a lot of book knowledge. Okay, here's cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT. Here's the steps that you go through to get through this. Here's the meds that you take to get through that. But having somebody who's like, I've had this experience where I was in bed and I didn't have any kind of reason to live or motivation to get up, and I got through it, can be so powerful for somebody who's where you were. And even if you feel like I'm not far enough, if you think back to where you were at that time, you're like, I'm really far from where I was also. I'm just pausing really quick for anyone who may have joined later to just let you guys know that obviously this is not a live discussion, but this is a discussion I had a year ago. And I just wanted to play it because I actually have not put this full thing on my page in its entirety before. And I think it's just a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I just lost my thoughts on that.
Well, I was going to tag onto that. Like that's something that we kind of try to do every now and then, even now, is when we're having those bad days or those bad mental health days, is to stop and think like, look at where we were. Look at how far, look at how down you were. And yeah, we're down right now, but it's nothing like it was before. And not only that, but you got through that super, super dark period. This is bad, but it's not nearly that bad. We could do this. We'll be all right. And it gives a lot of reassurance.
Yeah, I remember my thought. My thought was, you don't realize how many folks around you are suffering until you start opening up yourself about it.
Exactly.
It wasn't until I started posting about my mental health and then mental health advocacy that I would have friends at work say, "Oh yeah, I had depression." Oh yeah, when we would get on to do our
Twitch streams,
because we would get on and just play games and talk to people. Most of the time, the conversation was around mental health because we would explain why we were doing it to anybody new coming to watch the channel. And like, oh, I suffer from depression, or I suffer from anxiety, and it's really cool that you guys are talking about it. And it just, there's more of us out there than we realize, and sometimes it's just that conversation and that openness to, again, I don't know how many times I could stress it and say it in a conversation, is finding that support and taking baby steps. Will the depression and anxiety ever go away? I can't promise that. I am in a completely different place than I was, what we just talked about. I don't have those deep depressive thoughts anymore. And I do look back and, I have scars to look back and remind me of those times where it's really hard. But I see where I am now, and I see, the adventure that we've gone on from moving from one state to 2 states up and completely starting in a different life with, like, we have my father-in-law and his wife and, their son and daughter-in-law, but that's it. Like, I went from having all my family around me to next to none of my family around me.
Yep.
And that's hard too. And you think that would be triggering, and it can be very sad, and it can, the loss of my mother also recently, last couple months is brought back the sadness and the anxiety. But I know how to cope, and I know how to talk, and I know how to get through that. And I wouldn't have had I not opened up.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's just identifying those things that you do need, those things that help you get through those moments. And we're even still figuring that stuff out, but she knows now to tell me like, hey, I need an alone day, or I need a couple hours to myself, or I need this, and we make that happen.
There's 2 things that I wanted to bring up, and I hope that when I bring up the first, I don't forget the second. But when I first got into therapy, I remember I was having panic attacks. So there wasn't really, for me, anything identifiable before that to make me think I had any kind of mental illness or anything like that. the panic attack started, and I'm like, this is something going on with my body. So that's what happened when I went to the doctor. I'm like, something's going on with my heart or my lungs or something. I don't know what it is, but I need some kind of diagnosis. And when he's like, oh, that's just anxiety, here's some Xanax. I was like, anxiety? I don't understand. I didn't understand what it was and how it could just make me feel like I was about to die in a second. And yeah, so when he suggested that I go to counseling, I'm like, what is counseling going to do for this physical thing that's happening to me? So when I went into the counseling, I was very closed-minded. And I was like, so when does it end? That's what I want to know. When and how does this finish? Like, what's the end of anxiety disorder? What's the end of depression? And I thought there was an end. And when they didn't tell me there was one, I was out of there. I stopped going for months because I thought, this is just, I don't believe this. So I think I realized now, that was 8 years ago or so, I don't really think there's an end, but I just think that you learn what's going on with you and you get much better with being able to self-identify things that are going on in your life. And you've learned all these new coping skills and tools that you're able to apply to various degrees of situations, from little to big. And I think that was leading me into the second part. It made you stronger, I feel. Those situations made you stronger. And if you didn't have that strength that you developed from those tough times back then, when you reached the tougher times now that you're experiencing, you would have probably crumbled. But we don't realize that we are being prepared for those situations.
Right. I was thinking as you're talking about how your comment about like, okay, well, when does this end? Like, how do I get past this? How do I heal from this? Like, what's the magic pill? Sometimes, you ask yourself with mental health, and there isn't, right? And you very clearly, like when they told you, like, this is something you could be living with for the rest of your life. I think we're conditioned to think, I know we are conditioned to think that way because anytime we've ever gone to the doctor, childhood up to adulthood, it's for a sickness that they give you medication for. They give you a vaccination for.
You break your arm, you set the bone.
Right. Yeah. I sliced my hand recently and now I have a scar that I had to learn how to use my hand differently because of it. And it's not necessarily going to be the same. It's not like this one wasn't bad. It wasn't like going to be detrimental to how I use my hand. But you break a bone, you have to give it time to heal, and then you have to go through the therapy process, right? But even then, you're not going to be 100%. It is not going to be exactly how it was before you broke your bone. It's not going to be exactly how it was, your lungs, before you got pneumonia. I mean, everything in your body changes, and the brain and the mind are no exception. Once you trip and fall, and your brain trips and falls, you have to start the healing process. And that can take time, depending on the injury and how severe you are, and depending on how long it goes without being treated, right? Because if you let a broken bone go without being treated, your body is going to change according to that rate. And then there's going to be, in most cases, somewhat of a deformity. And you're going to have to change your lifestyle around it. Mental health is the same way. If you don't treat whatever the symptoms are to get you to a better place, it's just going to snowball into something bigger and worse potentially for you. And that's why you have to remember to treat it like any other normal injury or sickness before it's too late. And some just don't realize that what it is. Like you were talking about the panic attack. You thought it was a heart attack. The very first time I had a panic attack, I thought I was having a heart attack as well. I thought I was going to die because it was just consuming and painful. And why is this happening to me? And then I go to the ER and they say, no, nothing's wrong with you. You're fine. They didn't even give me, oh, you're having anxiety. They gave me nothing.
Just, no, we don't know.
We don't see anything. Your test came back normal. Like, I almost died, and you're telling me that nothing is wrong with me. No, you need to go back and figure it out. I mean, even then, it was like weeks after until somebody said, oh, that sounds like a panic attack. What? Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up because you're right. Sometimes people come into mental health thinking, oh, there's a cure.
Mm-hmm.
Like all I have to do is take a magic pill and it's going to be fine.
Yeah, and it's not so much a cure as it is a treatment.
Yeah. Two things I was going to say about that too. One is that really resonated with me. What a great example. And the reason why it resonated with me is because I spent months in physical therapy. And when people are like, are you better? I mean, I'm better to an extent, but it's not that I'm ever going to feel 100%. This knee problem that happened where my kneecap came out a few months ago, this happened to me when I was 17. That's the first time it happened. And, I was playing sports and I banged knees with somebody and it came out and I had to go through this rehab and everything like that. So because it came out before, that means it's a higher chance of coming out again. There's nothing that's going to change that. Even if they did like a surgery, it's not going to change that. It's just something that is going to be affected for my whole life. First of all, sometimes I feel pain in it still. Even before it came out the second time, sometimes it just aches for no reason. But it's not most of the time, and it's not nearly as painful as when it first came out. Even the second time when it popped out and I was talking to people about it, and they're like, wow, you're saying that so casually. I handled it casually too. I was on the ground. I'm like, I know this pain already. I know what happened. I know what the rehab process is like. So there's nothing for me to really cry about or, I did let out a yell immediately when it happened, but
it hurts and you're frustrated.
Frustrated and the shock of the initial pain, but after that it's perfectly goes with what you're saying. The first panic attack is like, the world is ending. I don't know what's happening. This is scary and I don't want it to happen again. And you're actually scaring yourself into more panic attacks, more anxiety symptoms. It just snowballs. It's like a fear on fear loop. And then after you get a hold of things and you're like, this is what's happening to me. I know what's happening to me. You can kind of talk to yourself. You can do deep breathing. You can listen to music. You can talk to a loved one, whatever it is that you use as your coping tools. And just not having that fear anymore automatically lessens the impact. Because I tell people I still have panic attacks, but they're not the type that I was having then. They're not like I have to run to the ER type thing. They're like, I have to slow down and breathe and just get through it and wait for it to pass.
Yep, absolutely. And even then, like for me, sometimes it's Tylenol. I shouldn't. And for a while I had to take Tylenol a lot because there is for me physical pain attached to it. And I can feel the muscle tension. Because that's what anxiety is. It's just manifested in incredible tenseness. But yeah, I have a big bottle of Tylenol in our medicine cabinet waiting for those days, just in case. I always carry it with me just in case too. It becomes too much. At least it's enough to kind of help calm me down. And to some effect, I think it's a placebo. Like I know when it's coming and I can feel that tension. If I take Tylenol, it's okay. Now I know the pain will go away. I don't recommend this to anybody at all. This just me psychologically, and I don't take it as much now. But I think for a while it just was that I need to take Tylenol, and that's going to be my placebo, and that's going to be my miracle pill. But very much so, it was just stopping and kind of evaluating what is upsetting me. This day is going fine. Why all of a sudden am I having this panic attack? So just really thinking and reflecting to be able to identify the root cause of what the pain could be. And not necessarily the physical pain, because you know exactly where the physical pain is, but where the mental pain is that's bringing this up. So that way you can get yourself to that good spot and breathe and just kind of release that negative energy.
Yeah, so one of the things that I remembered, I wish I had my notepad because there's so many different things that are coming up. When we're talking about this stuff, we're kind of speaking the same language. I don't really even have to explain too much because you, Cassandra, have experienced this, and Dylan, you've heard all about it. So it's not like I'm giving you something new. So there's not that layer of, oh, what's happening? I don't really get it. But a lot of people experience these things and think nobody else does because they don't have people to talk to about it. They don't feel comfortable sharing with people. So I think it's really important what you said about breaking the stigma. As much and as far as we have come, the stigmas still exist. And I'm going to give you an example. I hope you're familiar with this situation. Naomi Osaka. Have you heard about what's happened with her in tennis?
Not
No.
offhand. Perhaps.
I'll tell you guys. She withdrew. Yeah.
Sorry, was she the one that basically said that being a tennis player was stressing her the heck out, so she was disqualifying herself essentially?
Yeah, she was in a major tournament. She's the #2 tennis player in the world. And she was going through a depressive bout in the middle of a tournament or at the beginning of a tournament. She told them about it and she said, she asked them if she could forego the press conferences.
That was it.
Or I guess she told them, I shouldn't even say she asked. She told them that she was going to forego the press conferences. And they fined her. And then subsequently after that, she withdrew. So I started watching all these different videos and expecting that because she's a popular athlete, most people would be like, wow, I really at least sympathize with her. That must have been a tough thing to do. It was courageous. There was like a small percentage of people who were like that. And there was a lot more people that were like, you're a rich athlete. It's part of the job. This included fans and this included peers who are also playing. They're like, I deal with press conferences too. I don't always like things that people tell me in the press conferences either. And to me, it just kind of was a microcosm of what goes on in general.
That happened to the gymnast.
Simone Biles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you.
Same thing.
And hats off to her. I don't know how old Naomi is, but Simone is still really young.
They're both in their 20s, like early 20s.
And for especially, and I say that generation like I'm super old, but I'm really proud of that generation of, these celebrities that are speaking up about it because they truly are setting the tone for it. I remember reading about this Simone Biles stuff and how there was even a male tennis player had said, well, she just needs to like get over herself and, work through it. And the expectation. And then a day or so later, he had a match that he lost and he threw the biggest
big old fit,
baby fit and refused to play any other matches that he was scheduled for, one of which was a team match where because he decided not to play anymore after losing this one match, his teammate didn't even get to play an Olympic game. And what about, sucking it up and going on, this is what you just tweeted to Simone Biles, but here you are throwing a fit in front of everybody and refusing to play anymore. Like, what is that? I mean, it's not right. And I feel bad for the celebrities who do have the eye on them, the Olympians, the athletes, movie stars, who are really, truly fighting to keep their sanity. What they do is not easy. No matter how much you're getting paid, it's not worth your health. It is not worth your life to keep pushing yourself beyond your limits. And the fact that there are those out there that are stepping up and saying, no, this was what's important to me. And, I want to be around for a while and I want to continue to do what I love. I want to continue to make music. So I'm going to take care of myself. And if you can't understand that, I'm sorry, but this is what's important and it's what's right.
We seem to attach this kind of like they make a lot of money, therefore they have to do the thing. And it's not necessarily the case. Like the fact of the matter is, no matter what someone's job is, if they are suffering from depressive moods or any mental health challenges, like they deserve to have help, whether it's working as a manager at Disneyland, like we were, or whether it's, being a tennis or gymnastics pro, like you still deserve positive mental health. And if you need to take a step away from your job for a minute, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, whatever that job is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. We're watching this show called Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
It's an Apple TV series. It just like stole the Emmys recently. recently, like it did
last week or
last
whatever.
week.
Yeah.
But in this season, they're really touching on Ted, the main character, who's played by Jason Sudeikis.
Yeah.
His mental health, because he's having physical panic attacks in the middle of. There's one where he has one in the middle of a game, a soccer game or a football game, because they're in the UK.
They're in England, yeah.
And they're touching on the reasons why he has it. And at first, they bring in a psychiatrist, a team psychiatrist, and he's against talking to her. He's like, because he had a really bad experience with a marriage therapist, and he thinks that all they're out for is to just like talk to you for 54 minutes and then get paid hundreds of dollars. And he refuses to open up. And we're getting to a point now in the series where he's like, this is what happened. Yeah. This is the trauma that I've been going through, and this is what I've been experiencing.
So powerful. It was, I mean, it's a comedy series. And the first season is very much just like nice person gets other people to be nice. But now the second season is looking like this is a nice person that we love, but this is what he's really dealing with. You know, you may see someone look happy on the surface, but they showed his apartment in the episode that we watched the other night, and you see very clearly he's depressed.
Yeah, when he first starts out, the apartment's always nice and tidy, and now it's just a mess.
Yeah, there's open liquor bottles, there's trash everywhere. He's depressed and really suffering.
What I really enjoy about it is they're focusing on the main male character going through this, because I can't speak to it, so I would look to you, Mark, and Dylan too. Males especially are prone to not open up and talk, right?
Yeah.
Because you're told as you're growing up to man up, suck it up, tough it up.
Yeah.
And so you have to hide it, you have to mask it. You can't be weak. To show weakness, to show tears, to show emotion is a weakness. So the fact that they're making it the main character, and he's not some macho man, compared to others on the show, but he is a male figure who is portraying himself as having this mental illness, and they haven't called it out right, but you see outside of the panic attacks. But the fact that they're delving into it is incredible.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It really is. I mean, not to give too many spoilers away, but there was this beautiful scene where he, as he is opening up about what he's going through and the relationship he had with his father and what that all means, his therapist does something really beautiful, which is she asks him, she's, I see the reasons why you hate him. Can you tell me something that you love about him? Tell me a good memory. I want to understand both sides of him, because he wasn't just this one person. And you can sort of see as the scene develops, it's probably the first time he's had a good memory about his father in a long time. And it really sits well with him in a beautiful way. And he even thanks his therapist for it afterwards, And so to see just the journey that he's going through, the tears that he's crying, and the suffering, it's really beautiful.
Wow, that sounds like a great show. I need to check it out.
It's on Apple TV.
No one's seen it because no one has Apple TV Plus, but highly recommend. It's wonderful.
It is worth it if you ever want to do like a 30-day trial or something. And
yes,
watch
just
it.
binge through. Yeah. It's supposed to be a 3-season show. That was the original commitment. I don't know if they're going to try to go longer because it's doing well, but Jason Sudeikis has been pretty clear that he doesn't like being away from his family, stuck in England. So I think he wants to keep it at 3 years. We'll see.
It's a topic that you mentioned that gives me a lot of different feelings. Like, number one, yes, in my household, there was no kind of sharing emotions for me and talking about my feelings and things like that. That was something I just never did. Strong, silent type, as a lot of guys end up having to be in their household. But as an adult male with mental health issues, I was in a few experiences with physicians that demonstrated that stigma to me in such a way that was so damaging for me. I remember in particular this hospital that I kept going to for panic attacks. I had been there several times and they checked me for different things. And I guess the lady there was just tired of me. And she was just like, there's nothing wrong with you. We checked your chest, we checked your heart, your lungs. We did this x-ray, we did that thing, and everything came out negative. So she was like, man up. She literally said that to me in the hospital. She's like, man up. And the way that made me feel in that moment, when I came in there because I was having this terrifying thing that made me feel like I was dying, and somebody is telling me, man up at that time, I was like, there's no kind of validation for what I'm going through at all. I feel like I can't trust anybody to talk about this because at home, my parents aren't understanding what I'm saying. They're trying, you know, they're not people who didn't try, but they're not understanding what I'm saying. So they take me to this hospital. The hospital is telling me man up and sending me home without any kind of treatment, diagnosis, or anything. So I'm at home like, what do I do? And that led and translated into the agoraphobia that I developed. Because when I was still in a better position and seeking the help, I wasn't getting it. So I think it's really powerful what you're talking about with that show. And I think a lot of TV shows and things are starting to implement men, talking about men and their types of struggles that they have. Because there's a lot of, I guess, high functioning, I hate using that term, but like high functioning people who are a total mess in the household, but then they're able to go out to work and do these professional jobs, and their coworkers and their bosses and everything have no idea what's going on because they struggle and suffer in silence.
Yeah, I've been reading here and there about, you know, the concept of toxic masculinity a lot recently, and I feel like there's a big pushback from men because they feel like they're being attacked. And you're saying like the actions that I make are toxic, and that's not what the conversation really should be. Toxic masculinity is someone, regardless of their gender or sex, looking at you and saying you need to man up. That's what toxic masculinity is. It's negating your problems and just telling you to ignore them and be better than them when your problems are pretty crushing. And I think that we just need to accept that those concepts are what's toxic. That's what toxic masculinity really is, and we need to push back against that idea of just man up.
Wow,
and all
I
the
never
things
heard
like
that. That's really powerful what you just said. I never heard somebody say toxic masculinity is a concept rather than specifically saying like it's a macho man, or you know, the typical things that people think of when they hear that.
Well, and that's just it. Like the macho behavior is toxic, but it was because that person was made to feel that that's the way that they had to express themselves. That those societal pressures, I think, is what is really creating this problem. We just need to like evaluate that from a systemic level, the way that we're doing with everything else right now.
You know, with what you're saying, I could have taken what she said and gotten out of there and been real aggressive, because I'm like, okay, when I had my issue and I was at my lowest point and I came and I asked for help, the answer that I got was man up. So that could have made me just angry.
Mm-hmm.
And then I take that anger and that's what I start giving the world. You know, like they see me and I'm just this angry guy because I didn't have a proper way to express that emotion. When I was trying to express it to somebody, they were shooting it down and shutting it down and invalidating it. So you're right. I think that creates a really toxic kind of cycle.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, you guys are giving me some gems here.
What happens when you bring three great minds together, right, Mark?
Yeah. I remember when we were talking about Inside Out and how they learned about the value of all the different emotions, especially sadness.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times with the males especially, they try to act like we're just supposed to just only have certain emotions. We can't have sadness. Like that can't be a part of our lives. We just have to keep moving when things happen. But that's a really kind of dangerous game to play because the emotions go somewhere. And for me, because they were not going anywhere outward, they were getting internalized, and it can change your body chemistry. It can create more adrenaline and different things that you need for like danger, you know, fight or flight and all that stuff, but it's happening in your body without you being in danger and just generating these panic attacks.
I was kind of thinking as you were saying there, like when someone loses one sense, another one gets stronger, right? When you lose your sense of sight, they say your sense of smell improves. And it's kind of that same idea, what you're describing. If you don't allow sadness to have its day, then anger usually gets a heck of a lot stronger. It's just kind of going a different direction. Or maybe it's something else, like you said, it's going internal and damaging yourself that way.
That gave me a thought to one of the greatest lessons that I learned in therapy. And that was when I came to my therapist and I told her that all my friends were leaving me. And I'm like, all my friends are bad friends because as I started to tell them what's happening, they're just disappearing. They suck. And the therapist was like, well, you are exuding some toxic symptoms. Well, I don't remember exactly how she said it, but it was just like toxic traits. That's the word I was looking for. She said, I don't think you're a toxic person, but you're giving off certain toxic traits. So she was like, if somebody comes and asks you and they're your friend and say, Mark, how are you doing? What do you tell them? And I was like, I tell them I'm doing terrible. And she was like, okay, and then what? And then if they go and ask me any further questions, I say depression, I don't have a job, I just go into everything that's going on. And she was like, do you ask them about what's going on with them? And I was like, not really. I didn't see anything wrong with this because I'm like, I'm just keeping it real and talking about what's going on with me. So I said, well, then what do you suggest? If I'm having a terrible day, I'm not doing well, I'm not even doing self-care, like I haven't left my house for anything. And somebody is like, how are you doing, Mark? What should I say? Do you want me to lie and say that I'm doing well just so that I can keep the conversation going? And she was like, no, but what I suggest for you to do is to talk about what's going on with you and put a positive spin at the end of it and then ask them how they're doing. For example, like, I'm not having the best of days today because when I got out of bed, I felt a little bit depressed. But I know that tomorrow is going to be better, once I get through today. How's it going with you? So this is something that I, at first, was like, I don't want to hear that. But after I got some new friends, because I don't think I got too many of those old friends back, that's something that I started to implement in my everyday life. And I wasn't feeling like doing that. I was just framing it that way because I said, you know what, that is kind of true. It makes you kind of unintentionally selfish to where you're always venting and complaining, but not really offering them anything. And you're also not really saying anything positive regarding yourself. So it can make all the world of difference if you're having a terrible day, but you have a positive outlook for the next day. And then you ask about somebody else's day, and it takes you out of your own mind to be able to talk to somebody and help them tackle their problems. Plus that thing that you put in the air, like tomorrow is going to be a better day. You've already spoken it into existence for the next day.
Two things came into mind as you were talking. Specifically right now is, giving and taking energy. I've recently been learning more about myself, and I've learned that I have empathic abilities, and the ability to feel the energy of those around me. And I've always been this way. Anytime I'm in a group, I'm the quiet one, and people kind of freak out sometimes. And they're like, what is she doing? And it's usually because I'm stepping back and I'm just listening and watching and getting to know everybody. I'm feeling the energy of the room and trying to find how I fit in all of that. And if there's ever a problem, I know where I can step in and help based off of how things are happening in the environment. And I can also feel when, folks aren't feeling at their best, and when I can feel when folks are feeling at their best, because that's it. I can just take it in. The problem with that is, and I think it fed into what led to the depression. Actually, now that I'm talking out loud and thinking about it more, is at work, I was taking in so much stress. There was a lot of stress and frustration and anger that was happening with the changes that were happening, coupled with personal life as well, that I was taking it into myself. And there wasn't really anybody else that I could check in with and share and release that energy, onto or just release it into the world so I didn't like bottle up and keep it in, that it broke me down. And so when somebody is who is a sensitive person, is how it can also be referenced. It's very important to pay attention to the environment who you're around, right? So I can see how your friends maybe were overwhelmed, but you yourself were overwhelmed. So, I mean, you can't, well, I think it's important, like your therapist said, you need to take ownership of that, that you also need to give yourself some grace as well, but understand and acknowledge and then say, I'm going to do better, which you have done and taken steps for with the friends that you've made. You're giving out this energy now to, while it is not a good time for me, it is not a good moment for me, it is going to be better. And I'm going to give out this good energy so that way we can build and get to a better place together.
Yeah. I mean, friendship is kind of a partnership in a way, right? Like our friends help us through the tough times, but we kind of have to help, give them something to incentive to stick around. So if, they're asking how you're doing and you're pushing out just negative energy constantly, like they're going to be repulsed by that. But if you're throwing out some negative energy with a couple of like good notes in there as well, and also asking how they're doing, like it gives them that incentive to sort of stick around. Like, this is a tough time for Mark right now, but he is still invested in the friendship, so I'm going to stick.
So I will say this: what she was telling me did not apply to 100% of the people.
No, of course not.
Like, it wasn't a case where it was just me not giving them a positive spin and asking them how they're doing type of thing. But it was just something that in general that I was doing that I could do to better myself and strengthen my relationships with people in general. There were people who, even if I did that, they probably would have disappeared anyways. Because some people are not prepared to take on those kind of things.
Well, and this is a time too where as we're growing as adults and then things start to pile onto us, we learn who our real friends are, who are the ones that are really truly going to be there for us. The other part of what I was going to say was the how are you doing? There is a friend that we had actually interviewed at one point who expressed that he hates that question. Like he will never ask it, and he hates when he's asked that question, how are you doing? He thinks, or he felt at the time, that it was just a phrase that's thrown out there with any, like, oh, you're just asking because it goes with hi, how are you doing? That's really how it is. Nobody really cares. It's just, what would you call
it's just a greeting. It's
common
not even
courtesy to do that, an expectation to say, ask how you're doing.
It's not me actually caring about how you're doing. It's just a salutation. It's how you start the conversation.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I kind of took offense to it, and I told him, I hear you, and I hear I don't know if I said it in these words, I probably didn't, and I understood, but when I ask, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I genuinely want to know, because I've learned again, and it wasn't something that I was aware of then, that the energy I receive in these conversations, I could potentially give back, or help increase by having these conversations and help make somebody's day. I mean, that was literally my job, was to take care of the cast members that worked on property, so that way they can make the guests that come to Disneyland that much better. And if it meant being a punching bag, I was going to do it. I needed to ask, how are you doing? How can I make this better? And even in just normal conversations, if I saw you yesterday, things could have changed since I saw you.
Yeah.
And I am just the type of empathic person that really cares and wants to know. So that way, if there is any negative energy that is surrounding you, I can help contribute to the good energy to help you see through the rest of the day.
I think empaths see through a different lens. I know empaths see through a different lens. Not that I think. I am an empath, so I know that I see through a different lens. And I'm going to give you an example that I was in the grocery store. This was a year ago. And I was just doing the self-checkout, which they have in New York. And, for whatever reason, I guess to prevent people from stealing, they have somebody standing there watching you do your self-checkout or whatever. I guess also if you have any issues with scanning and things too. She looked like she was kind of down. I was having the worst day when I came into that grocery store. I'm like, I just want to get my item and get out. I don't even want to look at somebody. I don't want to interact with anybody. And I looked over at her and she looked like she was having a worse day than me. I had no idea what it was. And I was checking out my stuff and I'm like, I'm going to walk past her. But because of who I am, I felt like I'll feel so terrible if I walk out of this store and don't say anything. So I was like, how are you doing? That's all I said. I didn't say, you look like you're down. Let's have a conversation. I just said, how are you doing? And she was like, I'm hanging by a thread. And I was like, I was thinking that's not the answer I was expecting or hoping for.
Mhm.
But this leads me into the next part of what I was going to say, boundaries, self-boundaries. So I wanted to say something to her, but I didn't want to get into a whole long discussion because I was depleted. So I just said, whatever that you're going through, I'm sorry for that. Just go home at the end of the day, get some rest, think positively. And, tomorrow's going to be a better day. She was like, oh, thank you for saying that. That was really nice. And I went out and I felt happy because I said something, but also I felt happy because I didn't open up the conversation to give more than I had to give. And a friend of mine, his name is Aaron, he said recently, boundary setting is the ultimate form of self-care. And I was thinking about that as you were talking about work and things that I've been through where things have been just thrown on me and all kinds of things and changes are going on for me too at work. Not now, but well, somewhat now, but a lot more before, where I'm just like accepting these things. Yes, I'll do that. Yes, I'll do these extra hours. Yes, I'll do this extra work. Now I'm at a point where I'm like, even in a job setting, I will still set boundaries. If setting boundaries makes me not have a job, but I keep my mental health and my sanity, I'm fine with that. I think the more we learn about ourselves and our limits and everything like that, and we are able to express those in various different settings, whether it's with family, whether it's with co-workers, your boss, whether it's with somebody you see on the street that you don't know, is the better that we do overall with our mental health.
Right, absolutely. Opening up as an empath is causing me to take in too much energy, that I've been drained more often than not recently. So because I'm acknowledging what I am and opening up what I am, I haven't found that balance yet. So I absolutely appreciate you sharing that story and reminding me that yes, I do need to set those boundaries. Your
And
friend Aaron is incredibly wise in saying that as well.
Yeah, he's gonna like that when I post it. The one other thing was I was relating it to the how are you doing part. In a corporate setting, and you guys have both been in a corporate setting, you know that when you get emails, when you see each other in the office or wherever you're working, what happens when you pass by each other first thing in the morning? It's like, hi, how are you? Or in the email, it's like, greetings, I hope you're well. I hope this email finds you well. So a lot of people ask and a few people mean it. So I think that possibly in the case of what you're talking about, it's like so many different people ask that question as a formality, but it's like, I'm just tired of the question. But I think that for me, I've grown to appreciate the people who say, how are you doing? And they want to know how I'm doing. Like when you ask me how I'm doing, Cassandra, and I say, I'll give you more of an answer than I might give one of the people that I have in that box, because I know that you're actually asking. I know that you'll sit down and be like, okay, let's talk through whatever issue that you're going through. Whereas other people, I know that ask me like, how are you doing? Because we haven't talked in a while. And it's like, I have to say that, or it's just a formality as a greeting that I give. I know they're not emotionally prepared to actually sit there and listen to me if I give you an answer other than I'm fine. So I'll just tell them I'm okay. And we won't talk any further than that. We'll just get into the casual topics from there.
I had a boss some years ago when I was at Disney, actually, and he was not my favorite boss in the world, but he did give this leadership pep talk at one point when he talked about this exact thing, when he said that question, how are you doing? he said it's a very casual thing. He's like, but as a leader, you need to be very careful with that question, because if you ask it, you need to care about the answer if it's someone that you're in charge of, someone that you're leading, because they're going to tell you, and you need to take care of them and deal with their issues like it's yours. That's just part of that service leadership kind of thing. So, ask the question only if you really mean it. And that's the one thing I really respected about him. I give a longer talk about the things I don't, but that's
okay. Oh, we all can.
Yeah.
I hear you there.
I really appreciate that perspective, because maybe at the time I just misunderstood what he was saying. He did make me feel like it was just in general. I don't like it when people ask me. Overall, I do not like people ask me. But it could be that because he was also in the same department with me, and it probably boiled down to that too. I tend to overshare a lot, so if anything, I'm training those who really don't like to ask that question to just don't ask that question to me, because you could ask Cassandra the question and she's going to tell you, she's going to talk your ear off, and you're not going to go anywhere. So that's my way of weaning those folks out.
People who are empaths also, I feel, tend to think more about the impact of the things that they're saying to other people. So before you even say it, you're like, I wonder, no, I don't want to say this because they might take it this way or they might think this. Let me figure out the best way to say it before I say anything. Mm-hmm. Whereas somebody who's not an empath just responds right away. And they might have said something that could be offensive or damaging to the person, but they're not thinking that way. And then the empath is sitting here like, why would they say that? Because they're looking at the words of the other person through their own lens. I wouldn't say that. This is what I would do in this situation. So the other person's walking around like la-di-da, not thinking anything is even wrong sometimes. And somebody else is feeling upset. And then they cross paths again. And there's like a tension there, like a one-sided tension. And then sometimes you get into those discussions and then the person is like, where is this coming from? I don't even, like, that was so long ago and I didn't even think this was an issue. So that's why I thought that boundary setting comment was so important. Like letting people know right away, you know what, I didn't like this. I mean, I know you did in your case, but I'm just saying in general, a lot of times people don't say anything at all. And then just start walk around with this tension that the other person doesn't know is there.
That's all great. I need to learn to set those boundaries. I also need to learn to recognize them, because I do feel the negative energy. I'm also the type that really wants to jump in and fix. I think that's just part of the nature of who I am, is to help people and to not fix them, but really help them get to the good place. Because I just feel everybody deserves to be in that good place, to be in that happy place where they can just enjoy being, enjoy the moment. And when they don't, I just really want to contribute to that. But it's not my place sometimes. I think your example of your self-checkout story with the employee is a fantastic example of that, both for yourself and for her. Like, you recognize she might need some, but I can't give her all of me, so I'm going to just give her some. And hopefully that'll be enough. And it was for both of you.
Yeah, especially something I've learned in the last year and change now with caretaking responsibilities at home. That takes a lot. That takes a lot of like mental and emotional energy. So, and then I do a job where I'm talking to people all day, 40 hours a week, about their family problems, about things that are going on, deep emotional issues. And because of those two commitments that I have, it doesn't leave time for much else. So instead of me reaching out, like what Dylan was saying, and just asking people, like, hey, how are you doing? How are you doing? How are you doing? I'll wait until I'm in a space to be able to actually care about the question and sit down and wait for the answer, whatever the answer might be. So for me, that might be like a little periods of silence where I'm like, I cannot connect on my social media right now. Or I cannot text people or call people at this moment. because I don't have the capacity. And once I like recharge up a little bit, then I'll reach out, because then I'll know that, you know, I'm giving them my best and I really care about what I'm saying. Yeah.
Every time we talk, I learn something from you. There are times too when like I open my mouth and I'm like, gosh, and I'll sit and think about it for a while. Like, well, it's out in the world right now, but at least the next time I come back, I'll be smarter for it.
I'm for sure gonna rewatch this because you guys gave me some great ones. That toxic masculinity portion definitely has to be a topic of its own at some point. But I'm going to take something that I borrowed or stole from you guys. I have like a few questions that I'm going to ask you guys before we close out. And I want each of you to answer them. The first one is, if you were a food, what food would you be? What was the facial expression, Dylan?
No, I just, these sorts of questions are always hard for me.
Pizza. I'd be pizza. Everybody loves pizza.
Oh, sure. I don't know. I try to get too creative with it. I'd be a cheeseburger. We can come in all different sorts of styles.
Yeah, so what would your food be, Dylan?
I'd probably go with like a cheeseburger or something like that. Like it's kind of all American and normal, but there's also lots of variation.
Okay. If you could take two animals and switch the sounds that they make, which two animals would you choose?
It'd probably be like a giraffe. Or dog, bird, animal.
Yeah.
What sound does a giraffe make?
Not a giraffe. I don't know why I thought about giraffe. An elephant.
Okay.
Where did I get giraffe from? An elephant, and it has to be something small. Because you would just expect an elephant to just have this big, boisterous sound, and then it just goes little itty bitty thing.
Yeah, that's the same thing that I was thinking was you have to go for like a swap that's just going to be silly. So I was thinking
that too.
Yeah, something along the lines of I didn't go like elephant and small. I was thinking like a lion and something tiny like a rabbit or something like that.
Like the Cadbury commercials.
Yeah, very similar to that. You get the rabbit that sounds like a chicken.
Okay, so the next one, if you lost the ability to see every color except one, what color would you want to see? If you could only see one color for the rest of your life.
That's a tough one.
This is off topic, but still on topic. Our son just got LED lights to hang above around the frame of his room, and they're bright. And so he's been changing the colors, and every single one I'm like, whoa. So that's especially hard because I just lived through that, seeing
just one color in the whole room.
I think it'd have to be like maybe a blue, a light blue, because it's calm. From all the colors that he went through, the blue was the calmest for me.
It's tough because like my initial thought was like I'd want something pretty, so I was thinking like a sunset. There's like colors in there that I would enjoy, but then only seeing that would be a little jarring, like oranges or blues or purples or something like that. So I don't know, maybe like a green.
It depends. Do I live in anger? Do I live in fear?
That's a good one. That's a good reference. That question is so terrible for me because it's like when my clothes in the closet, I could never wear one color. Like my dad was like a black suit and navy blue, like standard colors type of person. And I've never been that person. One day I could wake up and I want to wear this turquoise, or one day I want to wear red or green. So if I could only see one color, it would be so terrible.
No. What can you do? Like maybe like rainbow colors? You just said all the time you see all of them.
Yeah.
All of them, yeah.
Dazzling.
So I'm going to ask two more questions here. this might be a variation of a question that you guys asked me before. If you could be any superhero, who would you be? And would you choose to be a hero or a villain?
That's a tough one for her, I'm sure. I give this, people would ask me a lot because I've got like, you know, the nerdy tattoos and stuff. I can't even get my arm in frame. Nope. What's going on? Anyway, got tattoos. People ask me about like comic book characters, things like that. I always respond, while Batman is my favorite, I think Superman is the best. And Superman is the best simply because he's a being that doesn't have to help. He's invincible, he's invulnerable, he doesn't have to care about us, but he chooses to every single day. And I think that's an inspirational kind of message. And so I think I would hope to be Superman for that reason.
I would be remiss if I didn't say Harley Quinn. Initially, when you were saying superhero, I was like Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
I would definitely be Wonder Woman. But Harley has become this great amalgam of both hero and villain. She is so eccentric and misunderstood, but so intelligent and so strong that, I mean, that's why I idolize her so much. So, and hands down would be Harley. And I get to choose based on my mood. Do I want to be a little bit villainous, or do I want to be a little bit good?
Mm-hmm.
Superman. Superman's one of my. I have like a love-hate thing with Superman. Like
everybody does.
Yeah, like I love his powers and everything, but like compared to a Batman, let's say, he's just good all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like
that's the trick.
When he's talking to Lois, he's like, Lois, I know that this person is making you mad, but you know, you need to look at the good side. Or if somebody's doing something that makes him mad, he's trying to like talk to them and convince them to be good instead of shooting his like heat vision at them.
Yeah.
And I say to, just like what you were saying, I think it's so hard to have the powers to do all this stuff. And he's the most restrained out of all of them.
Yeah, that's what I love about him. And you're right, it is a love-hate relationship because he can be so boring. The writers that don't know what to do with him, he's too powerful. You don't have anything to throw at him. But the problem is that it's not whether or not he survives, it's whether or not everybody else around him survives.
Yeah. Because
he will. And him having to live with the loss of humanity, or even those that he cares about, that's the challenge. And the fact that he chooses every single day to care is a huge, huge deal.
You want to know what's so interesting too? I think Cassandra liked your answer. No, but I was gonna say, you want to know something that's interesting too, is that you see that he goes through self-esteem issues.
Yeah.
Like, especially when everybody is like, oh, this guy is a villain, and they're trying to paint this different picture of him, whatever. Or sometimes he might make a mistake, or sometimes there's two things going on at the same time, and he goes over to this one, and then all the people are like, well, why didn't Superman save my husband? Or why didn't Superman save this person or that one? And, you know, this was happening and Superman wasn't there. And then he always goes through these periods once in a while where he's like, I wonder if the world would just be better off with me not there. And he either surrenders himself, goes to jail, dies, depending on which Superman and what story. But there's always scenarios where we see him not there. And I think just as much as him saving people, his example that you're talking about is huge for humanity in all those scenarios where they're like, if the most powerful person or whatever, alien, whatever you want to call him in the world, is able to do all these things and chooses not to and use those powers for good, I can do those same types of things in my everyday life.
Yeah. I know you only got like one question left after this. I don't want to go too far off into a tangent.
You opened up the note.
I know, but two books that I'll recommend. One is called It's a Bird, which is written by a guy who was a comic book author who always said, like, the two things that you always want to be asked as an author of comic books is A, can I have your autograph? Because no one ever recognizes them. And B, do you want to write for Superman? And he talks about in this book, which is somewhat autobiographical, about being offered the Superman book and him turning it down and why he did. And it relates very big with mental health issues, and actually with I think it was a relative of his that had Huntington's disease, and the pain that he kind of went through with that. And it was very much this idea of there are people suffering from things that Superman can't fix. And what do we do about that? And it's a beautiful book and very sad, but very powerful too, and talks about the power of that character. The other one that I'd recommend, and it goes directly to what you're talking about, is All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison. This is a guy who understands the character better than anybody. And he wrote a story that was like a 12-issue, like its own universe kind of thing, where Superman finds out that he's dying. And he has to get the world ready for his absence. He doesn't tell anybody that he's dying, but he's going through these processes, very much like the labors of Hercules, to get the world ready to be without him. And one of the things he does is this very beautiful little thing. Him being the god that he is, he creates this universe in his Force of Solitude, this miniature universe, because he wants to see on this earth, way down inside that, he wants to see this world without him. What would it be like if he never existed? And that world that he finds is ours. And it's the one where we create Superman, the comic book, because we need him. We need these beacons. We need these ideas, these images to strive towards, just like you're saying. Like, he's a roadmap for what we should try to be. You know, he's this guy that could do anything he wants, but chooses to do the good.
That's great. You just made me like Superman more.
With a bad writer, he sucks, but with a good writer, he's amazing.
I'll tell you the hate part. The hate part is when I see somebody do something that's personal to him, that gets him angry.
Mm-hmm.
But he doesn't just uncontrollably go and just beat the person up or hurt them or whatever. He's still using the same, like, he may be talking to them sternly, but he's not like a Batman.
Mm-hmm.
You do something to him and he's going out there for blood. You know,
yeah, he's going all the way up to that line that he won't cross.
I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to stomp on you. Like, I'm going to do more than what's necessary.
But I think the key is
dark part of me.
No, absolutely. But the key is that Superman knows what will happen if he goes to that place, and it's the end of everything.
They don't face what he faces because they don't have the power that he has.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they feel less responsibility because they're like, he's like a civilian. You know, he can fight and he has his armor and his weapons and everything, but he still feels like, I'm a civilian beating up another civilian.
Right.
Whereas Superman is like, I would feel morally wrong.
Yeah.
Trying to just,
this is an unfair fight.
Yeah, like he specifically makes sure the forces of what he's doing are not things that are fatal.
I was so happy when the Man of Steel movie was coming out, and one of the first posters was of Henry Cavill in the suit in handcuffs. I thought it was such a beautiful, powerful image for that film. And the movie itself didn't quite live up to the expectations that I had for it. I still enjoy it. But I think that Zack Snyder, as a director, kind of gets that idea of Superman as an icon, but he doesn't quite know how to express it, I don't think. But there's definitely pieces in there that are really beautiful.
We for sure have to have a movie,
yes.
movie discussion, a whole discussion on just that.
Yeah.
But the last question I was just going to ask was, if you could pick any celebrity to be personal friends with, like they're now part of your friendship circle, who would that person be?
Why do you have such good questions?
Yeah.
Oh man, these are so hard.
Seriously, because you go with like the cool ones that you just like want to hang out with all the time, or do you go with like, I don't know, like the really rich ones that are going to buy you things?
I know that on the spot the answer is different than having time to think about it. For sure.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
The first name that came up for me was Taika Waititi.
Mm.
Who?
That guy seems. Taika Waititi.
I didn't hear you.
Oh, Taika Waititi.
Who is that?
He's a director. He's made a lot of really actor director. Yeah, he has acted quite a bit. He directed Thor Ragnarok, but he's also done a lot of movies. He's a New Zealand director. He did a movie called What We Do in the Shadows, which he starred in. It was like a mockumentary about vampires. Very funny.
Did you see the recent movie Free Guy?
Oh, Free Guy.
No.
Okay.
He's in that.
He plays the main villain in it.
What was the movie about?
It's
Ryan Reynolds is a video game character who gets the cheat codes and can start hacking into the game that he's in.
I think I heard of it. I didn't see it, but I think I saw the trailer.
Yeah.
He is a really interesting and fun guy. Like, he does a lot of behind the scene work. He also does a lot of acting work too. All which I can't think of right now.
But he makes some beautiful stories. He did a film called Hunt for the Wilder People, which was with Sam Neill about a guy in adopted child, just trying to get to know each other and not really doing very well at it, but being very funny and sweet kind of movie. He did a film called Jojo Rabbit, which he starred in as Adolf Hitler. But it was this, it's this interesting idea. So there's this New Zealand guy dressed up as Adolf Hitler in this film. But it's about a little kid who is growing up in Nazi Germany, and his imaginary friend is Hitler, because he doesn't know any better. He doesn't know who this person is. He just knows the name and that he's our great leader. And so it's kind of dealing with hate and prejudice from those perspectives. I mean, he's a really fascinating dude. Recently, he's producing a series called Reservation Dogs, which is a series completely about and starring Native peoples. It's really fascinating because he's got these stories in there, and I'm seeing stuff online from actual Native peoples, and they're going like, "This is exactly our lives." Like it's being perfectly portrayed. So he's really big on representation.
Nice.
It's been really fun.
Like if there was a major movie, and Thor, did you see Thor Ragnarok?
Mm-hmm.
He was the big rock guy.
Yeah, the Korg.
Oh,
yeah,
okay,
he was the voice of that. He's actually a director for The Mandalorian too.
Yes. Yeah, he's directed several of those. Yeah.
And
amazing
guy.
He
has an amazing repertoire, and does like I said, he does a lot of behind the scenes work, directing, producing, and writing. But he's also hilarious, and he's a great actor too. So
I think that's a great call.
Fun to just like hang with and talk with, and probably even get deep with, and just have a good time.
Yeah, he'd be really fun. Oh man,
I gave you time. I know you were talking about Taika, but
no, that's such a good answer. Like I can't even follow that up. I don't know. For me, like my celebrity is way different. Like I love podcasts, I love comedy and things like that. There's a handful of comedians that I follow, and one that's actually pretty nearby to where we live, named Kyle Kinane. And he's always just been such an interesting, like, weird fellow. He just seems like the kind of guy that'd just be fun to hang out with and get a beer. And the stories that he tells during his stand-up, like obviously you embellish for comedic effect, but his stories are based on like true events that are still very funny. He tells stories about getting kicked out of Canada. He tells stories about cops raiding a party that he was at that really shouldn't have even been raided because nothing was happening and things like that. Like very funny stuff.
Okay.
I think he'd be fun to hang out with.
I'm trying to think of mine. I know they're my questions, but I was trying to think of somebody. I mean, I watch tons of sports, so I would probably immediately go to an athlete. Probably a basketball player. There's this basketball player, DeMar DeRozan. He played for the Toronto Raptors. That's my team that I follow. He's not with them anymore, but he's become like a mental health advocate. He was one of the first people in the NBA that was known for talking about his clinical depression. And it's so cool to me because he was like, when he first mentioned it, it was something he was going through for years, but never talked about. Then he made like a Twitter post that just said, sometimes this depression gets the best of me. And then all these outlets picked it up. And he said, I didn't say that to become a mental health advocate, but I was so surprised by the responses that I got, and like other NBA players reaching out to me and saying, wow, I deal with this too. And all these fans, like, this is huge. If you can deal with this and still have a successful NBA career, I can do more in my own life type of thing. And it connects with what I've said and what you guys have said, where it's like you don't start for this noble reason of I want to change the world or help all these different people. You're just like, I'm just sharing. And then you just find that it's a snowball effect from there. So that's why I had him in mind for my person. And one last thing that I wanted to say, I ask all my guests to give a personal definition of what a champion means to you.
I think a champion is synonymous with hero. It is somebody who will get up and fight the fight even when nobody else is getting up with them, because they just know it's the right thing to do. And it's for a good cause, and it's going to help others. It's going to be the person. They will be the first person to lead a movement. And they can come from humble beginnings, and turn into something great. They don't have to be a celebrity to start. They don't have to be a literal sports champion in any means. It is just somebody who saw something was wrong and stood up and said something or did something about it.
Yeah, I would say my definition of champion kind of falls in the same lines. It's anybody who is willing to stand up for something. And even if you don't succeed at your goal immediately and you feel like you're getting knocked down, as long as you're pushing forward and continuing to get back up, like that's a champion in my eyes.
I love both of those answers, and thank you guys so much. Is there anything else that you wanted to say, a positive message that you wanted to leave everyone with? I know I'm asking you guys a lot.
No, I think it's just really important for us to, really continue to spread that word of support. Like, you are loved, you are appreciated. Mark, thank you so much for continuing on.
Yeah.
The I would say the journey, the path, the whatever this roadway is that you're building to create a better world, a safer world, a more supportive world for those that are struggling. It doesn't have to be about mental health. It can be in a sport. It can be in a profession. Being able to reach out and talk to people is a big thing. And I am so proud and inspired by you, and so glad that you are continuing on this work of greatness.
Yeah.
You yourself, if no one's already told you this, you yourself are a champion. And I am so grateful to have you in my life, our lives. I'll speak for Dylan, because of it. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
And just, we always said it before, but we're all stronger together. And so if anybody's out there is hurting, like, get someone else to sort of be that support. It's okay to ask for help.
Thank you guys, and see everyone next time. Let's have a conversation.